attack on Saudi oil facilities had brought the Middle East to the brink of war. But after years of growing hostility and competition for influence, Iran and Saudi Arabia are now taking steps to try and reduce the tensions in the region. The question is, will they succeed? And how is the U.S.'s presence viewed in a region where they are seen as the main obstacle to peace and more? I'm Alican Ayanlar, and I sit down with Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammed Zarif, one-on-one.
We've always been open to discussing anything with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is our neighbor. We're going to be here together permanently. We don't have any choice but to talk to each other.
But one country that talking to that isn't an option just yet is the U.S. With tensions running high, Iran's President Rouhani rejected what would have been an historic meeting with Donald Trump. So is war still on the table?
I believe President Trump does not want to go to war. He does not want to escalate tension, but he has an impression that through pressure he can achieve his goals. I think it may have worked in real estate, but it doesn't work in dealing with other countries.
That pressure may have led Iran to enrich uranium beyond the limit. The question is, are they pursuing nuclear weapons?
No, we have made it very clear at the highest level that we believe nuclear weapons are, first of all, inhuman, anti-Islamic, and also that nuclear weapons will not augment our security.
And if security is the issue, then we ask, who is Iran's biggest enemy?
Israel is the biggest threat to our region and to the world.
Dr. Zarif, thank you very much for speaking to TRT World.
Good to be with you.
Before we get into how you're dealing with the current fallout that you have with Saudi Arabia and the United States, I want to go back and start off with what happened on September 14th, the attack on the Saudi Aramco oil facilities. One U.S. State Department official has described it as the Saudis viewing this as their own 9/11. You have come out and said that you have no involvement in this. But who do you think was behind it?
Well, first of all, 9/11 was their own because 15 of the 19 hijackers were Saudi citizens, so it's not their own 9/11. They started 9/11. But in fact, people have forgotten that for 4.5 years, people of Yemen have been under constant bombardment. Children have been killed, have been maimed, women, elderly, mostly civilian. Most casualties in Yemen are civilian. 100,000 dead, over 2.3 million people suffering from cholera, something over 20 million people, which is a large percentage of the population, are malnourished. Now, people who are under this severe attack are expected to simply stay quiet and not respond. At least they responded by not killing innocent human beings, by attacking an oil refinery. The question that needs to be asked is why for 4.5 years the world was quiet about the atrocities in Yemen. So people are less important than oil, because not a single individual was killed in this. Now, they want to attribute this to Iranians because they want to forget about the fact that they've been basically massacring Yemenis, committing war crimes against Yemen. But since they want to neglect that, since they want to relegate it to irrelevance, they accuse Iran of doing this.
Immediately you talked about Yemen. There are many intelligence agencies that would say that the Houthis don't actually have the capability to conduct such a complex attack, to evade a very complex early warning system, air defense systems. And they would also attribute that the Houthis are getting training and arms from the Iranians, including short-range ballistic missiles, including drones, things that were believed to be used in the Saudi Aramco attack.
Well, first of all, the Houthis have, in fact, taken responsibility, but we are simplifying the problem in Yemen by attributing it to the Houthis. Yemen had a government with a lot of weapons. All those weapons were bought by Saudi money, with Saudi money. Now, by putting the blame on somebody else, they won't resolve the problem. That buying weapons will not buy you security. If Saudi Arabia wants to be secure, the best way is to end the war in Yemen, to start good relations with its neighbors, with the neighborhood, and don't trust the United States. Even the Americans on their money say, in God we trust. So the Saudis should not say, in US we trust. They should trust themselves, they should trust their neighbors, and they should trust God.
We'll get to what role you see the U.S. playing in the region in just a bit, but let's actually talk about where we are right now. Tensions are running high. We know that Iran and Saudi Arabia are doing something to reduce the tensions, whether it's backdoor diplomacy or getting other countries involved like Pakistan and Iraq. Where are these talks now? Where are these discussions?
We've always been open to discussing anything with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is our neighbor. We're going to be here together permanently. We don't have any choice but to talk to each other, and we have been open to talking to Saudi Arabia, either directly or through intermediaries. We've never rejected any intermediary. From the former Prime Minister of Pakistan, Nawaz Sharif, who came to Iran and we received him with open arms, to the Foreign Minister of Indonesia, who came to Iran at the same time. We've always been open to mediation. And we've always been open to direct talks with our Saudi neighbors. President Rouhani presented a plan in the recent session of the General Assembly in which he called on all 8 countries in the Persian Gulf region to join in an attempt to bring peace through dialogue. It's called HOPE, which is the acronym for Hormuz Peace Endeavor, and we hope that it can proceed, that it can be discussed and further enriched by our neighbors.
I want to go to one of the comments made by President Hassan Rouhani at the United Nations General Assembly. He said, the solutions to the Arabian Peninsula's conflicts must come within the region. The security of our region shall be provided when American troops pull out. The question is, that all sounds fine, but how realistic is that when you have a region like the Middle East where it produces maybe 50% of the global oil supply, 40% of the natural gas? How realistic is it to expect the Americans to leave?
Well, the Americans have been here for 30-some years with huge military buildup, and even before that, through proxies, the Shah's regime, the Saudis, others. Did we have security? Have we had security? That's a failed experience. That's a fair, I mean, if we're talking about how realistic it is, this is certainly not realistic because we've experimented it and we've all failed. Now, it's another experiment. Others have done it through engagement, through cooperation. We see that in Europe, where we had all those wars, now countries in Europe cannot even think of a war because they have had economic integration, they have had confidence building measures. The Helsinki process, which started in 1975, has been able to move forward. We suggest the same approach. So we have a failed approach. What is here on the ground is a failed approach. What we are offering has been successful elsewhere, successful in areas where they had a history of war. So why don't we try it?
What are your personal thoughts on President Trump?
I think it is up to the American people to have thoughts about their leaders. But as representing a government which has to deal with other governments, I believe President Trump does not want to go to war. He does not want to escalate tension, but he has an impression that through pressure he can achieve his goals. I think it may have worked in real estate, but it doesn't work in dealing with other countries. It certainly doesn't work in dealing with a country with 7 millennia of civilization.
So you said that President Trump does not want war. Will Iran do everything it can to avoid war too? Does Iran want war?
We don't want war. We never started a war. We have a history of at least 250 years of defending ourselves, not initiating any war. We defend ourselves. If there is an encroachment on our sovereignty, on our territorial integrity, we defend ourselves. But we believe in a war, everybody loses. There are no winners in a war. One side will lose less, another side will lose more. That's how we compare winning and losing in a war. Nobody wins, and nobody in their right mind should go for a war. But we won't escape a war. If there is a war imposed on us, the only way to deal with it is to fight it.
I want to move over on to the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. One of the more recent comments that's come out has come out from the UK Prime Minister. Mr. Boris Johnson has said, it's not a good deal. And if there's anybody who can actually make it a better deal, it's Donald Trump. I'm wondering what you thought of the UK Prime Minister's comments, that it's not a good deal.
That was basically an off-the-cuff remark which was never repeated by the British. I think the Brits know that a better deal cannot be made. We might all have ideas about a better deal, but believe me, those ideas came to our minds during the negotiations. We had the best negotiators from all sides, but the problem is, or the beauty of negotiations is, that nobody gets all they want in a negotiation. But we found out through discussions that we were not capable of resolving all these problems, so we concentrated on what we could have addressed. The fact that we did not address certain issues at the end of the day does not mean that we neglected them. It means that we had a realistic appreciation that if we wanted to address those issues, we wouldn't even be able to address the one issue that we were able to address.
So why do you think Donald Trump pulled out of this agreement then?
But I think because he was misled to believe that this was a bad deal by those who did not want to have a deal at any rate. I think Mr. Bolton's track record is clear. He never wanted a deal. He never wanted a deal in the early 2000s when he was the Undersecretary of State for Disarmament. He prevented a deal which would have been much better for the United States then. He tried to prevent this deal. He was on the payroll of organizations that want regime change in Iran. So I think he listened to the wrong guys.
You think the European partners of the JCPOA could have done more to salvage it? Or before that, do you think the deal is salvageable?
I think the deal is in the interest of the international community. But I think for our European partners in the deal, they should do more in order to salvage their own integrity, in order to salvage the fact that they want to live as independent grouping of states. I think Iran can live without the nuclear deal, but can Europe live with the impression that it's not a reliable partner in any deal, that any deal that you want to make with Europe, you have to make it with the United States.
Well, the United States is living with it.
The United States is living with it because the United States has basically pushed, not the United States, the administration, has pushed the rest of the world into simply accepting its bullying. But can Europe live with this? Not without the nuclear deal, but with the perception in the world that you don't need to deal with Europe. You only should deal with the United States because Europe will tag along. Whatever the US does, Europe will not be able to change it, whether it's for better or for worse.
Well, the US is left then.
US has left them, yeah. That's for them to decide. I think if it's in the vital national security interest of anybody to preserve the nuclear deal, it is in the vital national security interest of Europe as a continent to show that it can be a partner in an international agreement independent from the United States.
You've called on all sides within the JCPOA to recommit to this deal. Does that mean that you're not willing to negotiate on a new deal?
Obviously, we believe that this deal, which was the subject of many years of posturing first by all sides, and then serious negotiations for 2 years, again by all sides, cannot be renegotiated. It can be built upon, but it's different. Building upon a deal is different than renegotiating a deal. So we have never closed the door to negotiations. We never left the table. The table is there. Now there are 6 countries and 1 international organization sitting around that table. Used to be 7 countries. So we never left the negotiation table. The one seat that is empty is not Iran's seat, it's that of the United States.
You say that you haven't left the seat, but in recent months, Iran's Atomic Energy Agency has broken some of the commitments to the JCPOA by enriching uranium far beyond the limits of the stockpiles foreseen in this. Why?
Because when we negotiated this deal, we negotiated it with open eyes, not based on blind trust. And that's one of the beauties of this deal. That's why I believe this deal cannot be improved extensively. And one of the provisions that we put into the deal was that if one side violated the deal, what would the others do? Well, for P5+1, they had a recourse. If Iran violated the deal, they could have taken us back to the Security Council and used the snapback mechanism that is in the deal. But this was a mutual understanding. So what would Iran do if they failed to observe the deal? Would we have any recourse? The recourse that we have in the deal is that after a procedure, we could stop implementing some of our commitment. Now, we took that procedure. We started that procedure on 8 May or on 10 May 2018. We gave the Europeans a full year to comply. That is, to implement their own obligations. We don't want Europe to implement the US obligations. Europe in the deal has independent obligations inside the nuclear deal and also in the commitments they made after the US left. In November of 2018, I wrote to the Europeans, actually to all P4+1, that we have exhausted the procedure and now we have to take our own remedy. So we're not violating the deal. We're using the remedies inside the deal. It is as if you imprison somebody for committing a murder. You're not violating his freedom. You're using the legal remedy prescribed by the law in order to address a prior wrong.
Okay. At any point, depending on however the developments may shape up in the future, will Iran ever pursue nuclear weapons?
No. No, we have made it very clear at the highest level that we believe nuclear weapons are, first of all, inhuman, anti-Islamic. There is a religious decree or a fatwa by the leader against them, and also that nuclear weapons will not augment our security. So this is a very clear answer that the leader has given, including in his meeting with Prime Minister Abe. He repeated that we do not want to use nuclear weapons or even to develop them. And Prime Minister Abe repeated that statement in his address before the General Assembly.
We're several weeks away from the first anniversary of the reimposition of heavy economic sanctions on Iran. I'm wondering how this has affected the Iranian people. How long do they have to wait for the burden to be released, to find jobs?
Well, the fact is that we have recovered over the last 1 year 40% of our currency value. We're back in the positive territory, in positive growth territory. We're reducing inflation. But sanctions have imposed heavy pressure on the Iranian people. And that is why we believe sanctions are war. The United States started a war against Iran. Maximum pressure is a euphemism for economic terrorism.
You've used that term on many occasions.
Yeah, economic terrorism. Why? Because Secretary Pompeo has said publicly, and that is a Newsweek headline, if Iran wants its people to eat, it has to follow what the US says. Now, read the classical definition of terrorism in any casebook, in any law book, in any law dictionary, even Google it. it says coercion or use of violence against civilians for political purposes, to achieve political objectives. Now, it is clear for the United States, and the Secretary of State is saying it, if Iran wants its people to eat. So that's coercion against ordinary people. It has to change its policies. So it's coercion against innocent civilians in order to change a policy. That's terrorism. In fact, because it borders on starvation, that's a war crime. So Secretary Pompeo should, in fact, hire a good lawyer.
In all this, who do you think is Iran's biggest enemy?
Well, I think Israel is the biggest threat to our region and to the world. The only possessor of nuclear weapons in this region, the aggressor against its neighbors, with ambitions over the entire region, with policies that have undermined developments and peace in the region. Now it's attacking not only Syria and Lebanon, but even expanding its aggressions against Iraq. So that's the biggest threat to the entire region and to the world peace and security.
And how are you going to deal with it?
Well, we deal with it by defending ourselves and by trying to expose the malicious projects of this regime.
If you look at sort of what Benjamin Netanyahu has done in the past 10 years, it's actually the mirror image of what you described.
Well, image is important, but reality is more important than image. Situation in Palestine, daily attacks on Palestinians, aggressions against Palestine, against Gaza, West Bank, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, possession of nuclear weapons, non-participation in any serious international disarmament effort, Chemical Weapons Convention, NPT. These are all realities on the ground. You don't need to make or frame a wrong image of the region by taking rather cartoonish photographs to the General Assembly. Realities are there, and realities have to be judged. Now, there are some governments in our region, unfortunately, that have bought this story that Israel can give them security. Israel cannot give itself security.
I want to finally ask you about Syria. What does Iran want in Syria?
Well, 6 years ago, when I became foreign minister, I walked on the shore of the East River with the former Turkish foreign minister, Ahmet Davutoglu, and I proposed to him a 4-point peace plan. Immediate ceasefire, inter-Syrian dialogue. At that time, we wanted an inclusive government, inter-Syrian dialogue, and elections. Today, I'm saying what we need is inter-Syrian dialogue, revised constitution, and hopefully in 2021, when the time comes for election, the next election. When I spoke to Foreign Minister of Turkey, it was before the previous election. Now it's the next election, and we have to prepare for it. I think the formation of the Constitutional Committee is a very important first step. We should follow it with serious measures, including moving towards less tension. I do not believe, while we accept the Turkish demand for security, we do not believe that security can be achieved by invading Syria, by incursion into Syria. We have better options. We have offered better options to our Turkish friends.
Like what?
Like the Adana Agreement. There is an Adana Agreement between Turkey and Syria, which is still valid. We can help bring together the Syrian Kurds, the Syrian government, and Turkey, so that the Syrian armed forces can guard the border with Turkey, together with Turkey. That's the better way to achieve security.
But Turkey says that they see the YPG terror group as a #1 threat to its national security.
We understand that. We understand that, but the YPG does not represent the Syrian Kurds. Syrian Kurds and Syrian government can in fact reach an understanding with Turkey so that the borders would be secure. I do not believe that by invading another country, our Turkish friends will be able to get security for themselves. And I do not believe that increasing violence will bring about the political solution that both Iran and Turkey, along with Russia, have tried to achieve in Syria.
Dr. Zarif, thank you very much for speaking to TRT World. Thank you.